Today is the first video where I take you along in my experience of getting into mountain biking and preparing for Duchenne Heroes. The focus for today will be on getting started, and so it's oriented towards the absolute beginner. I'll show you the bike that I started on and give you my answer to the following questions. What can you expect from an entry-level mountain bike? What does it compromise on compared to more premium options? And is it a cost-effective way to get going? I'll be looking at whether the mountain bike that I started on makes sense for a beginner. I'll talk about some of its features and its strengths and weaknesses, and then I'll give you my opinion on whether a bike like this is worth it. Let's get right to it by talking about the mountain bike that I got. It's a Decathlon Rock Rider ST120. New, these bikes are roughly 340 euros, but I've found some examples secondhand that go for about 100 euros. That's also roughly what I paid for mine. So when we start looking at this bike, the first thing that you'll notice is that, well, it looks pretty cool. I guess a lot of thought and effort has gone into the looks of this bike when it was designed, and it really shows. If you're riding with friends and they ride Treks or Cubes or Cannondales or whatever, you really won't stand out with this, particularly to someone who's not into mountain biking. So if that matters to you, this bike is a pretty good option. Now let's walk through some of its components and features. The frame is made out of aluminium, which is more or less standard at this price point. The main disadvantage of aluminium is that it's quite heavy compared to carbon, for example, but you'll probably struggle to find any carbon bikes for 340 euros. While we are talking about materials though, it is worth mentioning that the steel parts of this bike, like the seat post and the headset, will start to get rusty pretty quickly if the bike ends up spending a lot of time outside. The fork I actually really like. It's pretty simple and not super fancy, but it gets the job done. Its stiffness is adjustable by turning the weight adjuster. As you turn it, a number appears in the center that corresponds to your weight. This goes from 65 to 75 to 85 and so on. So if you weigh roughly 75 kilos, you can set it to that number, or a little beyond if you weigh 78 kilos for instance, and it'll be set up roughly correctly. What I like about this is that it's easy to understand for a beginner. Typically on other forks, the stiffness is set by measuring how much the fork sags when you get on the bike and adjusting it accordingly. If you're just getting started, you might not have figured this out yet, which can make adjusting the fork seem a bit intimidating. You might even opt not to adjust it at all and just leave it. Maybe the weight adjuster won't get you to the perfect setting, but it'll get you pretty close, which is a whole lot better in my opinion than not adjusting at all. And therefore, on a bike like this, I think it makes a lot of sense. The wheels are 27.5 inch. Many mountain bikes these days will come with 29 inchers, but 27.5 is also still pretty frequently used. So finding tires that fit shouldn't be too hard. They do require inner tubes, which makes punctures harder to fix on a trail compared to tubeless tires, so keep that in mind. The bike has mechanical disc brakes. These work fine, but compared to hydraulic brakes, which are common even on many entry-level bikes, they're just not as smooth and precise. This might not be such a problem when you initially get started, but I found myself getting tired of them pretty quickly and much preferring hydraulic brakes when I got to try those. Overall, I'd say that the choice of componentry on this bike is a bit basic. It definitely won't blow anyone away, but it gets the job done. Like I've mentioned before, I think this is to be expected somewhat at this price point. So what's it like to own and use this bike? Well, to be frank, it's quite competent, just as long as you don't need to go very fast. It provides a nice riding experience and can teach you good habits as a beginner. When I'm riding alone, honestly, I enjoy riding it quite a bit. When you ride with others though, is when you might start to notice its shortcomings a bit more. I suppose that due to its weight and gearing, etc., it's just not what you might consider competitive. You might have some trouble keeping up with someone who's on a bike with nicer componentry. So is this a cost-effective way to start mountain biking? Personally, I think this bike can make a lot of sense to buy, particularly second-hand. It is the cheapest way that I know of to get a relatively modern mountain bike, and parts for it are generally cheap and easy to find, so you can learn to wrench on it as well. To me, this bike is really a gateway into the sport. When you just get going, you probably don't want to spend a lot of money right away. At many trails you can rent bikes, but do that enough times and a bike like this really doesn't seem so silly financially. I do think that if you decide to stick with the hobby, it's quite likely that you'll ultimately outgrow the bike. But the way I see it, that's alright. If you had bought it for about $100, I reckon you can probably sell it to the next beginner for a similar amount. If you end up deciding that mountain biking isn't for you, you can sell it all the same. Having said all that, it is worth mentioning that there are entry-level mountain bikes that provide more growing room if you are willing to spend a little bit more. I'm referring to the aluminium hardtails that you can generally get new for about $500 to $600. Surely you'll be able to find some nice deals for those bikes second-hand as well. I just don't have any personal experience with those. Therefore, I've decided that for today I was going to talk specifically about my bike. I hope this video helps you a bit, or at least gives you some context in figuring out what bike is right for you. If you are thinking of trying out mountain biking, I think you can do a lot worse than a bike like this. If you did watch this as an experienced mountain biker, what bike did you start riding on? Let me know. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.